In 1983, Benjamin Libet published findings that seemed to undermine our belief in free will. His experiments suggested that our brains initiate movements before we're even aware of deciding to make them. This raises a troubling question. If our actions are set in motion before our conscious intention, are we truly in control? Libet's participants made self-paced wrist movements while the readiness potential, a kind of brain activity, was recorded through electroencephalography. This readiness potential began roughly 550 milliseconds before movement. In contrast, participants reported the conscious urge to move only about 200 milliseconds before the action. Libet interpreted this timing as evidence that brain processes can initiate voluntary acts well before our conscious intention is reported. This conclusion has sparked decades of debate, but there is a problem with this argument. G.E.M. Anscombe's 1957 work, Intention, provides a different lens through which to view these findings. Anscombe shifts the focus from the timing of brain activity to the reasons that make an action intelligible. For Anscombe, behavior is intentional when it can be described through the lens of practical knowledge. Knowledge not based on observation, and when it answers the question, why, in a meaningful way. She distinguishes between the mere bodily movement and the richer descriptions under which an agent acts with intention. In this view, Libet's experiment, which focused on arbitrary movements devoid of meaningful reasons, might miss the essence of what it means to make a decision. Anscombe's perspective suggests that the real question is not when a decision happens, but under what description a movement becomes an intentional action. This leads us to consider whether Libet's findings can even speak to the nature of intentional action. Because Libet asked his participants to perform arbitrary, reasonless movements, his experiment may overlook the essential structure that Anscombe treats as central to intentional action. The task required participants to move their wrists spontaneously, without any substantive goal or deliberation between competing reasons. This lack of context strips the action of what Anscombe would call its intentional character. In contrast, real-world decisions typically involve deliberating between reasons, pursuing goals, and making choices that align with our values and desires. In 1985, Libet himself acknowledged a potential role for conscious control in the form of a veto, a last-minute ability to stop an action initiated unconsciously. This raises further questions about whether his task captures the complexity of decision-making. Alfred Melly, in Effective Intentions of 2009, argues that such findings do not justify broad conclusions about everyday, deliberative decisions. The focus on simple, arbitrary movements may miss the intricate dance of reasons and intentions that characterize genuine decision-making. Yet this does not close the case. We must consider whether the readiness potential itself signifies a decision point or merely reflects neural noise, a question that will deepen as we explore the work of Schurger and colleagues. In 2012, Aaron Schurger, Jacobo Sitt, and Stanislas Dehaene proposed a new interpretation of the readiness potential. Their Accumulator model suggests that this brain signal might not mark a decision point at all. Instead, it could result from spontaneous neural fluctuations accumulating toward a movement threshold. This process resembles noise rather than a definitive decision-making moment. The model demonstrated that when trials are averaged and aligned to movement, they produce a readiness, potential-like signal. This challenges the interpretation that the readiness potential indicates when a decision occurs. It raises the possibility that the readiness potential might not signify a hidden decision, but rather a statistical artifact of how neural noise operates. This reconceptualization urges us to reconsider whether Libet's findings genuinely capture the essence of decision-making. The readiness potential in this light might not be a precursor to conscious choice, but a byproduct of neural processes that precede action. This interpretation opens the door to further scrutiny of what readiness potential truly measures and whether it can inform us about the nature of intentional acts. But Daniel Wegner's work presents an even more radical challenge. In his 2002 book, The Illusion of Conscious Will, Wegner proposed that our experience of consciously willing an action might be a post hoc construction. According to Wegner's theory of apparent mental causation, people perceive will when a thought precedes an action, fits it, and lacks any obvious alternative cause. This perception can occur even if conscious thought doesn't actually cause the action. Wegner's view suggests that our feeling of conscious will might not be reliable evidence of us being the authors of our actions. Instead, it might be a narrative we construct after the fact. This stands in stark contrast to Anscombe's account, which focuses on the reasons and descriptions that give actions their intentional character. For Anscombe, the feeling of intention isn't just an inner sensation, but is tied to the meaningful context in which actions occur. Wegner's position forces us to confront the possibility that our sense of agency could be more about storytelling than about genuine authorship. This idea challenges the very core of what it means to act intentionally, and whether our conscious experience accurately reflects our role in action. The implications of these philosophical debates extend beyond theoretical considerations. In January 2024, Neuralink announced its first human implant of the N1 device. By March, participant Nolan Darbour was publicly demonstrated using the implant to control a computer cursor. This brain-computer interface can decode neural signals associated with intended movement. However, it doesn't yet decode the reasons that make an act a person's own. Anscombe's framework highlights this distinction. Predicting a movement from neural activity is not the same as understanding the intention behind it. The brain-computer interface can anticipate actions, but it cannot access the reasons framing them as intentional. This illustrates a critical gap between technological capabilities and the philosophical understanding of intentional action. While technology can interpret neural signals, it remains silent on the meaningful contexts that define intentionality. This gap underscores the ongoing challenge to integrate technical advancements with the rich, reason-based framework of human action that Anscombe emphasizes. As these discussions unfold, they invite us to reflect on our understanding of agency and decision-making. If readiness potentials and neural signals reflect underlying noise rather than genuine choice, and if our experience of will could be an after-the-fact narrative, then the nature of agency becomes deeply complex. The intersection of neuroscience, philosophy, and technology urges us to question how we define and recognize intention in both human and artificial contexts. As we consider these questions, we must ask, how will our evolving understanding of the brain and technology reshape our conception of free will and moral responsibility? These reflections will continue to challenge us as we navigate the future of human and technological interaction. If these ideas intrigue you, consider subscribing to explore more philosophical inquiries and their real-world implications.